welcome back to another episode of the Rizzcast podcast. And if you are a first-time listener here, we look at the intricate life of being an entrepreneur and creative while encouraging the pursuit of passions and dreams from a biblical worldview. Excited to be back for another season and excited today to talk with my good friend Jordan Marcotte. If you do not know this guy, you want to get to know this guy, we'll talk about it today. He's on socials, he has music and all kinds of things, different ways you can connect with him. I'm excited to talk with him today about this thing called creativity and entrepreneurship. And Jordan does a lot of different things. We're going to dive in a couple of things today. So Jordan, just give us quick 15-30 seconds about yourself, because I have some different questions and stuff that I want to kind of talk about. But for those who don't know you, just kind of share with us who you are.
Yeah, Jordan Marcotte. Been married 7 years to my wife, Sasha. We've got two beautiful daughters, and we've got a son on the way, coming in like 4 or 5 weeks. So that's wild. I guess kind of multidisciplined, creative, love entrepreneurship, love the risk. And that has expressed itself many different ways over the years. And but yeah, that's kind of where we're at today.
So I was trying to write down as I was prepping for this episode. You and I we've been connected for several years, and having a morning coffee, or we talk, we do trainings together. You've been a speaker at my conference before, and I was trying to list out and remember all the brands that you have come up with through the years. And if there's one thing I can say about you, dude, is like you're like a brand machine.
Word.
I mean, we can ideate something, and within like seconds, you're just like, I mean, it's a gift. Like you're just like popping out amazing titles, subtitles, taglines. And so a couple of the ones, of course, Marcotte Music. That's you and your wife Sasha,
Yep.
which I've seen you guys play out at different points in time, coffee shops. You guys have done weddings, everything. Don't Quit Music, which is a phenomenal brand about whether you're a musician, worship leader, whatever it is. Don'tQuitMusic.com. M House, which is more the branding company where you and your team that works with you, film things, edit things, release things for brands, whether that be realtors or creatives or musicians, whatever it is. And then your most recent one, which I want to talk about a little bit, is called Godly Folk, and you just happen to be wearing that hat.
Yeah.
And just so y'all know, I didn't prep Jordan with none of this stuff, so he has no idea what we're talking about. He just happens to wear that. So Godly Folk is incredible. You just hosted your first event here in Kansas City. Give us just a second on that, because that's a really, really amazing one.
So Godly Folk, I was actually driving down Highway 71 or 49, whatever, like 2 years ago. And like you said, I'm obsessed with ideation and like brand names or whatever. Just, and the first thing I always do is always go to GoDaddy. And I'm like, I just got to see if this exists, right? And so there was one night I was driving down the street, and I don't remember like what I was thinking about. But Godly Folk came into my head. And so I'm like, I stop at the light and I get on IG. I checked IG first because I was like, there's no way that this thing is not taken. I don't know why it would have been, but I was like, there's no way it's not, And, but it was available across every single platform. And so I remember snagging it that night, and I just sat on it, and I wasn't sure. To me, it felt like a clothing brand or something like that, which I'm not. Like my wife's fashion, I'm really not. But after this year that I've had of kind of stepping away from, full-time ministry after 15, 16 years, getting more into entrepreneurship, I started realizing like someone came up to me one day and they were like, I was having a consultation, and this lady was like, you just seem to be well connected. Like every person I talk to seems to know you and has great things to say about you. I was like, well, praise God, because it'd be tough if it was the other way around. And one day I was sitting at the coffee shop that we always go to, and I was thinking, what room do I wish that I had? Like what room do I wish that I had? Whether it was 10 years ago and even today, like do I feel like I'm lacking in community? I'm looking at other people who are pursuing other things and interests and creative endeavors, entrepreneurial endeavors, whatever. We might high five, at the coffee shop, may sit down, but like there's not, I don't know of an opportunity where people can get together and navigate high level strategy, but still care about the soul.
Mm.
And like that's why like I feel like I've kind of deemed myself like this soul strategist, because I love strategy, but not at the cost of losing yourself, which I think is the whole point of being able to try to build God's way, or whatever kind of phrase we want to use. Like we obviously want to honor God in all that we do. And so I had no idea what I would call this networking night. I was like, I'm just going to do a networking night, do an event. I had some friends coming in town, and I knew that if I brought them into town and then I said out loud and announced it that I was going to do this, that it would kind of hold me accountable to just like trying it, doing it, seeing what happened. And I love being in, like, I love being in rooms. And I think that this was the first event or something that I had ever like done where I wasn't either performing or directly speaking, or just, I was able to kind of host and let other people serve the crowd. But we had like 120 people, 115, 120 people
Mm.
at our first Godly Folk night. The goal that night was specifically to address dreams, how to overcome doubt, how to overcome disappointment, ask deeper questions than just sliding business cards across the table. Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
I would hope that we would all collab with each other, that we would all be able to provide high value service and all that stuff, do the business thing. But I wanted people to be able to walk into a room and maybe find someone that it wasn't just a business card swap, but it was like, let's get coffee and talk deeper. Let's be known, be seen, have some environment where we can be encouraged and strengthened. And because I didn't have an official name, I was like, let's just do Godly Folk. And so Godly Folk kind of embodied this idea of how can we build from identity, not for identity? Like how can we build kingdom creatives and legacy brands that obviously they're unto the impact that we desire to make, but not at the cost of like I said, our soul, our rest, our ability to be obedient over just trying to stick to the thing that we feel like we have to do because we saw it on Instagram.
yeah,
That we can still submit our businesses, our ideas, and our endeavors to the Lord. So that's kind of the high level and low of where
yeah.
it came from, and then what the event kind of what it was purposed for. And then we have it's coming up again this Friday. So
Yeah, so you had 125 people in a room, business people, artists, musicians, creatives, whatever. You said the statement from identity, not for identity. Break that down.
yeah, so that's probably like I think as a human, like as somewhat like that's kind of like my biggest thing. I think I think I teach, build, speak from that more than anything. One, yeah, for me when I think about from, um, oftentimes like when we have an unhealed, unforgiven, fractured version of identity, we try to use all the external things to tell us who we are versus, so like if I'm trying to run a successful business, I need this to be my identity. Like I need it to name me. I need it to encapsulate who I am.
Mm.
That will always create friction against who God says that we are as children of God. And so I remember one of the biggest things, like being fatherless, growing up in levels of brokenness and trauma. Just because I became a Christian didn't make being a son of God or having a heavenly father easy for me. Someone's like, you should be pumped about that. I'm like, but I have no context, even like I have no context for that. And so my journey, even as a believer, the last, excuse me, 18 years, um, has been that of like learning to heal and then actually reclaim and uncover like what my true identity actually is as a son. And so one of the biggest revelations this year, and I guess maybe even just since I became a father, my oldest is 4. And so the last 4 years, 2 years having another 2-year old and then having my son come, I just remember like, I don't want to build anything for the place of identity. But see, my whole life has been so performative. Everything was like my worth was so attached to my work. And, whether it was proving, pretending, pleasing, all of it. Like I just, even with God, which is really, really hard because that's not, none of it's sustainable, but that's just not sustainable. And I just remember breaking down to this truth, like I felt like to like the truest form where it's like, if I'm a son, if it's true that I'm a son and I can actually heal that position, like get to a place where there's nothing in the way of that, then that level of confidence can inform the rest of who I am and what I do.
Mm,
And so instead of trying, like, the reality is I wasn't born a husband. I was not born a father. I was not born a creative. I was not born an entrepreneur. I was not born doing this business. I was not born doing that brand. I was born, though, a son.
mm,
And so for me, my journey was being able to come back to a level of healing with that. But see, now that level of sonship now informs all of my other titles and things that I do. And so even in this season where there's been a lot of, like, maybe there's unique levels or of stress, maybe new responsibilities, I'm upholding all of this kind of stuff. My motto in my head, I say it probably multiple times a day, where it's just like, Jordan, but what would a son do?
mm,
What would a son do? And of course, without me going into the prodigal son story, it's like it really does depict both of that, from the entitled brother to the son who came. You know what I mean? Like he knew who his father was, thinking like, if I just look how he treats his servants, you know what I mean? Like, if I can just come back in that position, cool.
yeah.
And I've been trying to really work on and desire to want to build from that place, because I think looking in realizing that he's the provider and I can be a partner and a finder with
Mm,
him has really reframed a lot of, like, I want the right kind of responsibility, but I don't want to take on something that's not mine.
mm,
And so I think when we build business, when we build creativity or anything, when we do it from identity, I think it's actually it's like we hold it differently. The end result is different. I think it actually allows us to be of service to other people, and it's not built so that it can, stroke our ego and build our self-esteem or make us feel like we belong, or that, you get where I'm going with all of
yeah,
that. So
totally.
from building from versus for, I think just it's really liberated me.
Hmm.
And so I think Godly Folk as a brand has kind of embodied that, or I wanted to embody that, as we get believers together, that there's never a moment where we begin like trying to use what we do to build to affirm our sonship,
Hmm. Yeah.
essentially, at the end of the day.
Love that. I love that. Now, is that the type of thing where you're open to, like, if someone's listening to this in a different state or even a different country right now, having kind of godly folk type gatherings in different cities and nations?
Probably. I mean, I think, me and you talk about this all the time. I obviously am very much an in-person person, but
Yep.
I know that there needs to be more online opportunities to be able to connect. And so I would probably say that's where I would steer that, is how can this become, you know, worldwide, meaning any person with a cell phone or a computer can access anyone across the world at any time, whatever. Just meaning, like, I would rather be able to host these opportunities where there can be some, online anchor points where people can still get teaching, encouragement, and don't have to, like, the demand isn't always on the room. So,
Yeah.
but I just love the room. So yeah. Anyways.
Love that. So talk to us about, you said you weren't, born an entrepreneur, you weren't born all different things. Were you born a black belt in karate?
I was not born a black belt in karate. I indeed had to earn that sucker. Um, yeah, I done all the other, conventional sports: football, basketball, baseball, the whole deal. My grandfather took me to a taekwondo tournament when I was like 7, and that sparked a massive interest. And of course, this was during, the era of, like, Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers were just like super hot. And so every kid wanted to do karate. But yeah, I got into it, man, at 8 years old.
Were you ever a GI Joe guy or not so much?
I was never a GI Joe guy, believe it
Yeah,
or not.
I
Yeah,
love GI Joes.
yeah, I could see that. You probably still have some in your office, don't you?
I probably do. I'm not going to show my camera.
So yeah, man. I mean, that was martial arts. Was, looking back, that was one of the greatest gifts to me as someone who struggled with fatherlessness, who was looking for mentorship and guidance.
So
So
you never knew your father?
I met him when I was 21.
No, you're 21. So
Mhm.
you grew up single parent home for part of it, and then a stepdad came in?
Yeah. So my mom had me when she was 15, and I I owe her so much, but out of her own brokenness, she was desperately trying to find love for herself, and I think her own version of healing, and so um, born without a father. Unfortunately, my earliest memory is watching my mom get beat up at
Mm,
like 4 or 5 years old in front of me.
wow.
And then my mom's first husband that man did more emotional damage, I think, in a short amount of time. Framed. One of the memories is being in the living room, and he's like, "I won't buy you anything unless you call me dad." And so there was this out
Wow.
of his insecurity,
Thanks.
sonship and fatherhood was just built around manipulation, and you know, and so that framed a lot of my early years from zero, from being born to like 6 or 7, 8. There was like a lot of yeah, emotional suppression, and created a
Yeah.
lot of yeah. So that journey, like I said, that journey to sonship, like martial arts really helped create a sense of
Mm,
discipline.
mm,
um, and you just combine all of that with being a biracial kid. You're just trying to figure out where you belong. You're trying to
mm,
figure out what you're supposed to claim, who you're supposed to be. I mean, we could go on and on about all that stuff, but that's why identity is such a huge thing for me now,
mm.
later in life, is because that's one of the greatest gifts I think God gave me, was just understanding belonging without
Mm.
it being like some cheesy thing. It took a long time to get there,
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say, was this sonship revelation? It wasn't a time at an altar call, a kids camp in high school. So you say it took a long time. We're talking years, like
yeah,
decade plus.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, there was a lot of layers to it, man. Literally up until I'm not saying that we ever like arrive,
Mhm,
but there's been layers of it even up until now. Being,
mhm,
like when I burnt out, I just at 34, year and a half ago, I realized, man, I had carried such a performative
mm,
bent about me, even with God. And so it really didn't matter about what I could say out of my mouth. My
mm.
behavior didn't reflect that. And so there was still just a lot of like, I got to prove something to somebody, and not even to somebody, but him. And so,
Was that where martial arts became? So you said it was positive. Was there also like a crutch in that because you won? What was it, like some Midwest type competitions? Like you
yeah, I
got
mean, I was the number one competitor for 2 years. Yeah.
in
Just
in the
all around
Midwest.
martial arts in the Midwest. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So that's pretty. So you were like driven, disciplined. Martial arts taught you that, but then the Lord began to use that to, the discipline in other areas of your life, right?
For sure. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it was good. Like the honestly, the performative part of it, of my trying to find my worth and my value, showed up in a lot of other areas. And I feel like if I did not have martial arts, let me explain that, other areas like in school or relationships or friendships or even at home, like and so martial arts, I think, really helped ground me
Hmm.
and taught me longevity, right? Because as an 8-year old, in order to get your black belt, martial arts is not seasonal. It's not like football or something where I'm going to go play, take a break, play another sport, get all excited about football again. That's why there was a lot of like dropout and turnover in
Hmm.
karate. The churn level was high because kids just got tired and burnt out and lost interest, I guess, more than anything. And so, but then God used it, man, to lead me to Himself. That's the wildest thing,
So
too.
you were a believer. So even though your home was very intense growing up, you had the Lord that whole
I did,
time.
I did no, not at all. I did not. I met a karate team at a tournament in when I was 16. And then I started driving from Topeka, Kansas to Baser, Kansas, which is roughly an hour. Basically Kansas City, I'll just say that. So from Topeka, Kansas to Kansas City, I drive every weekend. I started training with them, traveling with them, and that's where kind of like, yeah, this whole thing started exploding for me.
Mm.
So every weekend I would go and do that. And then the karate instructor started taking us to church. And I didn't it's not like I had maybe gone to, I went to like Awanas, with
Yep.
some friends growing up, or I went to a youth group once or twice. But I didn't have any like negative connotations to church, right? Like I wasn't like offended or anything. So I wasn't like resistant to go when the karate instructor wanted to take us. And so I was doing martial arts in Topeka. Then I met this team in Kansas City, would travel every single week. And it started becoming part of the routine. We would go to church on Sunday, then I
Mm.
would go back home. We did that for like 6 months, 9 months. And so long story short, it was February 18th, 2007. I was a junior in high school. Um, Again, I'd been going to church with them for like 6 months, 9 months. I probably would have told you I was a Christian, but I didn't really know a life of surrender. And then it was that night. It was a Monday night, I'll never forget, or it was a Sunday night, because we had Monday off the next day. And I surrendered my life to Jesus, and then that's where kind of everything shifted and pivoted there.
And you never dealt with blaming God for your upbringing?
No, I mean, I never did. Like, I'm really grateful that I had amazing grandparents.
Okay.
Um, I think my life could have taken a lot of turns.
Hmm.
Even with them, I think my life could have taken so many turns with how informed I was in the beginning. But again, the way I've been speaking about this lately is I said, a lot of people look at kids who grew up fatherless or just like are introduced to. Um, I don't want to get this wrong. I remember I did a quiz a few weeks ago. ACEs, are you familiar with that?
I don't think so.
Adolescent. Let me look it up because this was huge for me, man. I think it's like someone watching this is going to be like, you should know this. Yeah. Adverse childhood experiences. I'd never even heard of that before, but I tested like 7 out of 10. Like it was it was nuts. And so yeah, man, like I think I could have gone a lot of different directions. But yeah, the way I've been explaining this lately is like some people learn how to act up and it's easier to see what's happening on the surface,
Yeah.
right? Oh, they're doing this, they're doing that, their behavior's bad, they get older, now they're on drugs, now they're sleeping around, alcohol, whatever, like all the things that I feel like oh man, they must have really had it bad. I just learned to act. Like I just learned to perform. And the issue with that behavior, the issue with learning that is a lot, you get praised for that, right? So like I was young, charismatic, handsome kid, best smile in high school, up for homecoming, flipping 12 feet in the air, #1 champion, national champion in cheerleading. Like, bro, I was hitting all of it, bro.
Wow.
Um, and but the issue is that if you don't allow that to go to a soul level, and you start to teach kids emotional intelligence, you start to navigate mental health and getting clarity around all of that. What ultimately ends up happening is I think that we build that into our careers, we build that into our relationships, and I think that that's where ultimately men specifically end up running into issues later on in life. They
Yeah.
cheat on their wives. They can't handle the pressure. They don't know how to communicate. They shut down. They burn out. And it's because they've been praised for the external stuff. And so they perform and perform and perform.
Hmm.
And so I'm just so much like person over performance, which is crazy because like I am just a high level performer.
Yeah.
I'm just like me and you both, I would say we're both just like high achieving. We're like we get it. And there's a healthy way to do that. But when your performance is attached to your worth, oh, dude, it's just, it's a horrible way to live. And so, yeah.
So let's go a little bit deeper here
Let's
now.
do it.
15 years, 17 years, 15 years full-time ministry.
15.
15. So taking all this talk of performance that we're talking about, you step in at what age to full-time ministry? How old are you?
Right now, I'm 35.
So when you started full-time ministry, you were 20.
19.
19. And talk about that. I mean, let's just be real talk here, because I think performance, no matter how your upbringing was, because there's people who maybe grew up in like a great, quote unquote, great home, two parents didn't have that type of abuse, who
Yes.
also like massively perform.
Yes.
From the other end of that pendulum.
Yes.
Let's just kind of go there a little bit. Be real here. In ministry, there is a strong propensity to perform, not only in your craft, like karate. Okay, you're performing in karate, but in the church, if you have a gift that's being utilized, whether that's the parking lot attendant or the musician or the pastor who's preaching or the Sunday school person, whatever it is, I have a gift, I'm utilizing it in the church. It's also tied to your walk with the Lord in many ways. So kind of how did that, I have a lot of thoughts. We'll see if I share them here, but give us kind of what your thought is on that.
Yeah. I mean, that's, to be honest with you, that's a whole podcast that we could do. All right. So let me try to do this where I'm not all over the place. So so real quick, I feel like this will bring a lot of clarity for like whatever. So When I joined that youth group, I got saved in my youth pastor's garage. We had no church building. So that was that night, February 18th, 07. On MySpace, that prehistoric social platform, the youth pastor, he was like, "Do you want to be the praise and worship leader?" Now, for me, genuinely, I do not sing. At that point, I could not sing. I could not play an instrument. Right? I was number one champion. I'm doing all this stuff, um, and so people thought I was crazy. For like, I slowly, I stepped away from martial arts. I stepped away from my future. I
Mm.
stepped away from going to business school. I even tried it and still felt just so convicted. I went there for a semester, all that stuff. So I was headed into being an entrepreneur. That's what's crazy. It was my best subject in senior year or junior year in high school. Um, and I loved it so much. I was going into business school. I wanted to open up my own martial arts studio. I love teaching, all that stuff. So then when I let all that go and I picked up music and worship leading, I believe that I actually got a really amazing gift as a worship leader, because it wasn't about, in that moment, I started leading worship without it being about the music. It was all about seeking God, finding what's on his heart, and then leading by example. Then
Mm.
music came.
Mm.
So then, to spare you long story, it's like, obviously I got a little bit better. I jumped into full-time ministry, did an internship, got plugged up with other people who were doing, music and worship leading full time. And then we just, I went for it. The issue is that in the beginning, I was so optimistic. I was so willing. I felt so much grace to let go of everything. I mean, people thought I was crazy, man. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Because I'm telling you, like, I had folks that were like, "Bro, you can't sing at all." And I'm like, "That's awesome." Now it's funny now, right? Because it's like I've been around the world now singing and
Yeah.
cutting records and leading worship and doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to God that he gave so much grace to do that. But that performative nature, like, literally, Justin, out of my mouth, bro, I promise you, I used to say, I never want worship leading to become what martial arts was. I
Mm.
think toward the tail end of karate, I think it got really easy, again, just for me to, I need this to tell me who I am.
Mm.
Please tell me who I am. And so I had a lot of opportunities young that I felt like God gave me opportunities to climb ladders to a certain degree, only to fall down.
Mm.
I feel like he let me taste fame. I felt like he let me taste certain things, be among leaders who I thought were going to be responsible for providing these grandiose opportunities for me, massive levels of disappointment, always bringing me back to himself.
Mm.
And so when your survival method is relying on your skill and your talent and your giftings, they'll fail you
Mm.
because you're not building character. And so some of the issues, even as I got older, dude, I would watch people excuse bad character, or,
Mm.
or, or excuse even opportunities to discipline me, like raise me up as a good, solid man with great integrity and character, because they were afraid to lose me
Mm.
as an asset to their ministry, to their church, to their thing.
Mm.
And so what that did in me was like, it just reinforced this idea that I can just I feel crappy on the inside, but I guess I'm just going to continue to perform my way through. And so in
Mm.
worship leading, like, I know you probably wanted me to talk a little bit more exclusively about worship leading, but like, then with like the actual job of worship leading, sometimes, man, like, I was thinking about this the other day, because someone was like, what's one of the things that changed the most when you took your first year off after 15 years, 16 years? I said, I've been more mindful about what I'm singing and what I'm not singing in the congregation,
Mm.
because I don't want to lie. I don't want to just say stuff I don't mean.
Mm.
But when I was a worship leader, I always felt so responsible to bridge the gap,
Mm.
regardless of how you feel. And sometimes, bro, yeah, man, like, when you're responsible, again, I was a cheerleader, bro. I was responsible to take the crowd and what was going on in the field and be that mediator. Y'all
Mm.
got this, you got this, right? So as worship leaders, I'm sitting there with my guitar, man. I'm like, hey, you might feel XYZ, but man, he's good. And now listen, all that stuff is true. All that
Yeah.
stuff is true. But I
Yeah.
just remember, man, feeling like there were times where, like, I knew that my soul wasn't good. And I
Mm.
felt I felt guilty. I felt shame.
Mm.
I felt like a complainer. I felt like something was off with me if I wanted to step down, step away. I
Mm.
felt like I was abandoning some grandiose responsibility, not stewarding the gift, not, and again, I know we could take this into micro little lanes when it comes to the job, the role of worship leader, but that performative nature, man, like found its way through that whole journey, because there were moments where I'm like, yes, I'm grateful, I guess, that I could still show up here and still we can all align ourselves with what's true about God.
Mm.
But at the same time, like, I'm just not well in here. Does anyone care about that? Like, is it cool that can I step down?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So anyways,
That's
that's the, yeah.
yeah, that's real. And just being vulnerable myself, I spent 15 years on staff, with the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, and there's a lot we could talk about with that. And I'm grateful for
Yep.
so much that the Lord did in that. But just narrowing in on this one little performance piece, you know, um, it was challenging because like showing up, to a room is what you did, and hey, you show up, you do your prayer room hours, you do your set on stage, you lead, whatever. Um but again, even in that, like, I've had so many conversations with people where it's like, oh man, it was horrible, like, how dare you, make people show up to a prayer room, and it's so legalistic and everything else. And there's
Yeah.
elements of truth to that.
Yep.
But in those 15 years, it was a wrestle for me. Now in hindsight, of man, I'm grateful for someone compelling me to show up, because in the showing up, even if my motives weren't 100% pure, even sometimes if my motives were like, well, this leader, they'll know if I'm not there, I need to show up, right? um Good things were fashioned inside of my heart
Sure.
and done inside of my heart. There was definitely some funk mixed in there as well, of performance, or whatever it is. And but there are elements of, if you work a job 9 to 5, it's a little more cut and dry. So if you don't show up, you're probably gonna be fired. You know what I'm saying? Your paycheck, you will be
Yeah.
fired.
Yep.
But at IHOP, the House of Prayer, or at ministries or whatever, it's a layer deeper, because it's like, man, this is my walk with God is tied to this. My church family is tied to this.
Right.
Maybe a mentor or a pastor is tied to this. And so when you have, I think one of the greatest things when I'm coaching worship leaders or talking to creatives right now is find a mentor who can shoot straight with you.
Yep.
Because I think, and ideally I want to see, pastors think like this. That some of them probably never will, but because a pastor cares about the heart of people. But I find a lot of times pastors in churches are just preachers or teachers. They have a teaching gift. It's like, okay,
Yep.
actually, when we get down to the nitty gritty, when I talk to you, you're actually
Yep.
not a pastor, because pastors, care about the people. They don't care. It's not their primary gift. And
Correct.
it's, people are expendable. It's like, hey, you don't show up. Hey, we don't need you anymore. I'm doing my thing, whatever. And
Yep.
so,
It's good, man.
yeah,
Yep.
you have a thought?
No, I just agree with you. Yeah. I mean, it does get tricky because it's like, it's easy. I just feel like it's easy for it to get manipulated. Do all things unto as if you do it unto the Lord. Like there's all these like biblical like principles and all these things, but again, it's like how do we find how, I just think that like not everything in life is about balance. I think balance is this effort to try to like suggest that all things are equal, and so we're trying to stack certain things to actually like make it equal in balance, when I don't agree with that. For instance, like a big part of this season, right, where I realize, um, okay, I stepped away because of mentors. I actually did not choose it for myself.
Mm,
I actually was going to continue on in ministry, and I had a mentor who saw something, who said, hey, have you ever taken a break? No, I haven't. Right. Where I had to realize, like, I actually wanted to love Jesus at 50. And I realized that I was not going in a good
mm,
direction. I felt like I
mm,
was going to be, jaded, bitter. And I wanted to actually, and just believe that it would be better for my children than for me, right? That they would
mm,
have a better go at this than I did. I actually wanted to, like love the church,
mm,
not just be held under this thing of like, you just have to like find your place and do work at the church. I do think that people should serve their local community or whatever, of course. Um, but man, like I had someone who saw that my well-being and the condition of my soul was important. And so I just think it's like even the paying attention to the ministry of my home. How's my wife? How's my marriage? How's my
Yeah.
walk with my children? Am I loving them well? Am I present, or am I constantly, here? And so when you have that layer, like you said, like sometimes it's more cut dry with a 9 to 5.
Hmm.
But then we have this other layer where now it's easy for leadership to be like, that's why I would always like over spiritualize everything,
Hmm.
because I always felt like I needed like a word from God in order to make any kind of decision, right?
Yeah.
Even taking on worship jobs at a church, like bro, I've been asked probably just like you a million times to come and take worship positions, right? And they'll just like one of the first things every time they ask is like, "Do you feel called here? Like for the next 20 years?" Like that's how it
Right.
feels, And I'm like, "You don't even want to talk about salary with me."
Mhm.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Until you know that
Right.
God said I'm here.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Yep.
as much as I understand that, I'm like, guys, come on, man. Like, I don't know. There's just like, again, we could take this so many different ways, but again, I think it's just about if we're not trying to perform for our identity,
Mm.
then I think that we can have very clear ways that we know how we're honoring God with what we're doing, how we honor the responsibility of service that we're providing in partnership with another ministry,
Mm.
and we don't have to feel guilty about saying no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honestly, bro, I think that life comes in more rhythms. Like we're musicians, like blend and paying attention to like if everything Justin, if every musician was equal in the mix, it would sound like utter chaos.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see life, or even
Yeah.
the responsibilities that make up life. It's more rhythmic and we would call it balance, but like everything gets done differently. This compression, this EQ, whatever. And so it's like when I look at that, I just go, I think as long as we can actually like understand that we are serving from this place, we're secure in God. We're not trying to prove anything to Him. We're just trying to honor and do work as if it's unto Him.
Yeah.
Like I really do think that it's different, and that's been one of the biggest liberations for me is I've removed myself from feeling guilty, false loyalty places and with people.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, it just
I mean, and we're touching on something here that's pretty deep, but I do think is an epidemic in a lot of churches and a lot of worship leaders listen to this podcast, a lot of creatives, mostly believers, but if you're not aware, in that cut culture, again, in the upper echelon, if you will, of these ministries where, because if every ministry is here, then it kind of fans out like a triangle. If you're on the tips of that triangle, again, every ministry is beautiful as unto the Lord. The car lot guy directing traffic, the person doing the snack shop, whatever it is at a church. But the higher you get, the closer you get to the upper echelon of it, is really when a lot of times you begin to see a lot of these things. And I'm not demonizing every church out there. There are great churches. I know phenomenal pastors who lead in an excellent way. But as you get closer to that upper echelon is when you begin to feel and sense a lot of things that you just mentioned, where loyalty can be questioned. But I want to just mention that really, really quickly here. And again, this could be a whole podcast in and of itself. But the hyper spiritualization that if you grew up as a Christian and you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that there's a hyper spiritualization that you kind of learned, and again, it's not all bad. There's a lot of good things in there. Like we should be, set apart from the world, whatever, those types of things, and live a
yes,
biblical
sir.
life. But I
Yeah,
think in the realm of leaving a church, leaving a church job, or those types of things can sometimes just be hyper spiritualized where it's like, well, what is God saying to you? So many times, like, yes, there are references in the word where it's like, in the book of Acts, hey, stay here until you're endued with power from on high.
totally.
That's called the Holy Spirit being poured out. That wasn't like, stay here until I tell you which city to go to, Paul. It's like, all right, I'm praying, like, is it Thessalonica or is it Colossae? Where should I go? He spent like 6 years in prayer, like, which city should I go to?
Yes, sir.
Mostly what I see in the Bible is the Lord gave us the marching orders, if you will, and He has
Yep.
written it down in His book that as the ones who love Jesus, we should know His word. I even think of Jesus. He says, I only do what I see my Father doing. Right? Like He didn't say what I hear my Father saying, what I see my Father doing. I'm not claiming to know the fullness of what that means. Did Jesus have like an open reality, to heaven when He was here on earth? I don't know,
Yep.
but I take that more to mean the I know how my Father lives. I know
Mm.
how my Father thinks. I know how my Father moves because I draw away to be with Him. And so, in terms of like, do I cross the Jordan today or do I cross the Jordan tomorrow? Man, like I just need to know, when do I cross this river? Like I need to know. It's like, no, I think you can just kind of live and move and walk because God is inside of you. God is dwelling within you. The Holy Spirit is the helper, and He speaks. And so I know we're talking a lot, about these deep things, and but I really think that as creatives, as entrepreneurs, as worship leaders, having an ear, yes, tuned to heaven, but an ear tuned to God's word. And
Yep.
if what your dream is, what your desire is, what your inkling is, what you have a millimeter thought for a second, maybe I should go do this. If it's not contrary to God's word, yeah, pray about it. Maybe put a fleece out there. There's biblical examples of that or whatever. Test God, whatever. Like in some ways that biblical people have. But I also think you can just go ahead and do that. You don't need to wait 3 5 years. If it's not against or contrary to God's word, just move. And so I want to just end this podcast, share, and we'll have you back again because I've enjoyed this conversation. There's a lot of other things I'd love to talk to you about. We'll have you back, but just walk us through. And I know you and I were talking a lot during that season. 15 years. You had this mentor say, "Hey, bro, you ever considered like stopping that?" How long from that moment? Well, number one, did that resonate immediately with you? Because 15 years is a long time. 15 years full time, so it's paying the bills. You're traveling the world. Millions of streams on Spotify. It's paying the bills. Like, suddenly say, "Hey, you ever thought about stopping that?" Were you like, "Absolutely, I'm in"? Or were you like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa," like identity? Like, walk us through that process a little bit.
It was like a sense of relief for
Immediately.
sure, immediately,
Wow.
because I had never had a leader or someone that I felt like deeply cared about me say that before, that was even an option.
Was this someone at the church?
No, it was someone who very invested into my wife and I's music career, and
Okay.
that turned deeper into friendship and so at this moment, I was, because of the situation, I'd left my other church to come and start this other church with the youth pastors where I got saved in their garage, right? So we all started a church 3 years ago, and I was working for a financially. The only way to do that was to be able to come in and do content work for the pastor's roofing company and be on staff, like just come and help with the church. And so, long story short, and it was something I could agree to because it worked out. It was them. I wanted to do this. I wanted to be a part of it. But but yeah, the thing that I had stepped away from when I was considering all this was just the roofing content stuff. And so I was in a full agreement to that. But not, even out of my mouth, I'm like, nah, I could never. No, I don't think God wants me to step away from like leading worship and pastoring and whatever, because I was the associate pastor there too, and the whole deal. But sitting here in this living room right here one night, sitting with this couple, and me and my wife were processing with them, and he looks at me and he's just like, I think you took, because they had given me like a severance to step away and kind of help a transition. And he was like, I think you took the severance from the wrong job, like kind of like as a joke. He was serious, but like, he said it like lighthearted, knowing that it was about to come with like a ton of bricks falling down.
Mm.
And he's like, have you ever taken a break? And I said, dude, like no joke, from 19 to 34, I had never, ever taken any kind of retreat away from leading worship, being involved in ministry. And so, and like being at the house of prayer for those initial parts of my journey, it's like, dude, I was on 2 teams. I was leading worship on a Sunday with
Yeah.
church. And when you're young and ambitious, it's like, bro, you're living the dream,
Yeah.
but it's not sustainable. And so, yeah, man, like it was an immediate relief an immediate relief. And I thought it was just going to be a 3-month thing. And to be honest with you, it took 3 months just to even decompress. I mean, it like, so yeah, I think, I mean, I just helped lead worship for Father's Day. Like I maybe led worship 2 times in the last year and a half, which is insane.
Wow.
3 times, which has never happened. So yeah, man, immediate relief and zero regrets. And what God has done, again, this is a conversation for another day, but what God has done this year has been nothing short of just miraculous and amazing, freeing, genuinely freeing on the inside. So
I love it.
yeah,
That's amazing, dude. I appreciate your time. We'll definitely have you back. I love the
man, thanks
conversation.
for having me on.
And thank you guys for listening. Go give this guy a follow. We'll put his Instagram, some of his different brands in the show notes, and you guys can check him out. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Justin.